The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Planted with Sara Payan. I'm Sara Payan, your host, and today we have Neil Smith, COO of Avextra, a German cannabis company. I'm so excited to have you here, Neil, today, learning what's going on in Europe and Germany and just seeing all the great things that Avextra is doing. So welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks very much. Looking forward to it.
So my first question I always ask all of my guests is, what was your first cannabis experience?
So really, with cannabis, that came very much towards the end of my career. So my background is that I was a banker. I was in the city for 25 years. And as I left banking, I then went to work for McKinsey for a couple of years. And when I was there, I met my co-founder of the firm, Bernard, who basically had been researching the cannabis industry for a number of years. And he came to me one day and just asked me, would I be interested in joining an opportunity that had presented itself to him, working with a Canadian LP at the time to set up their cannabis operation in Europe. And so really, you know, I had no medical background, no expertise, never, you know, anything to do with cannabis until then. And so it was from that moment that I started to look at it initially, I suppose, as a business opportunity. That was my first kind of experience with or first discussions with Bernard.
Now, when you started to delve into it more, and I understand from, we were talking a little bit before we started to record that, you know, though, you know, not a scientist, you're, you know, in this company, what the things that you've learned while you're there, what's piqued your imagination and your interest?
So the real learning for me was, we have a clinic in the UK called Integral Medical Clinics. And that has allowed me to see real patients and to interact. I'm on the board of that company, so I can interact with patients who are using cannabis medicine. And so I quickly began to see with real life stories. I remember one particular situation weeks after we started our first prescription in the clinic, that a man wrote to us to say, thank you for prescribing cannabis medicines to my wife. You know, she was previously on very strong opioids and painkillers. She switched to cannabis medicine for the last 3 months and then she sadly died. But he basically wrote and said, without what cannabis allowed was for us to get her back and to enjoy her for the last 3 months of her life. And as I've started to, through the clinic, really see multiple stories of how people are using cannabis and how it's replacing opioids and allowing them to get their life back, that's transformed, you know, in a way. I started this as a business opportunity, but now I see it as almost, I mean, I joke with some of my friends, maybe it's me doing some good after being a banker for 25 years. I now see it as, you know, as a way of you know, a real opportunity for people to substitute medicines that are, you know, highly processed, poisonous potentially. Whilst they do some good, they also do some damage, for a medicine that's plant-based that really, in my view, must be better for them.
I agree. I had, before I worked in cannabis, I've been working in the industry now for over a decade. And I came from civil rights, and before that, technology. I always understood, you know, that cannabis was used sometimes when people were very ill, like in particular, like with the AIDS crisis and people going through chemotherapy. But I didn't understand the therapeutic benefits until my late 30s. I had stage 3 colon cancer. And my mother is a clinical researcher. So she did the clinical trials on Fulfox-5 that I ended up taking. And because of her, I knew that I could use THC to help with nausea and getting me eating again. But when I started working in the industry, and actually it was in California, it was pre-legalization when we were in the medicinal era, which I feel like we need to have more conversations about and really encourage, because as we're getting into legalization, people are starting to turn away from that as much. And I think that it's really doing a disservice to the patients because they need information to empower themselves to create relief. But the amount of people that I was able to help with getting off of benzodiazepines and opiates or lowering usage and the different things with different cannabinoids, like how helpful they can be in modes of use, it's incredibly important that we have these conversations. And that's something I do with talking with doctors and nurses and pharmacology students, teaching them how to have those conversations. And I'm really curious to see where you are, what healthcare providers, and, I'm not sure how much information you have about this, but where you are, how supportive they are of that, and how much information they're empowered with to be able to help people.
So not enough, I would say. I would say that, if I look at some experiences I've had in the UK where I've been going in for some treatments myself and, so being sedated and talking to the pain consultant who's sedating me, and we have a chat before I go under, and he says, "What do you do?" And I talk about medicinal cannabis, and they said, "Oh, is it legal in the UK?" And so, to find some doctors who are not aware that it's a possible treatment in the UK shows to me that it's really not widely enough known at all. And some of that's the cannabis industry's fault, because I don't think we've invested enough. I mean, we can talk a bit more about what we're doing in Avextra, but I don't think we've invested enough in what we need to do to prove to the world that cannabis medicine is a medicine like any other. And by that, I mean clinical trials, by going down the route that traditional medicines do. Because we haven't done that as a broader industry, that's not helped us. And it's something that we passionately in Avextra believe we have to do to allow the medicine to be widely used.
I completely agree. And the early research that we had was done with male rats, which, as we now know, men and women metabolize cannabis very differently, especially women during their cycles with the varying amounts of estrogen in their bodies is very impactful. And one thing when we were initially having the conversations about doing the show that I was really impressed with Avextra is that you actually dedicate a third of your total budget to research. And I'd love to hear more about that.
Our strategy is, the way we describe it, is two pillar. So pillar one, which is the buying and selling, if you like, of the cannabis product. So the typical cannabis business, where I've heard a number of people on your show in the past talking about running that. But that is the enabling pillar that allows us to then focus on we call it pillar two, which is the research and development. So it's our clinical trials arm. And for us, neither can exist without the other. But pillar one gives us the freedom to then really invest in pillar two. So I think we're the only the only company in Europe that has a phase 2 clinical trial currently approved and in process, which is quite exciting. And for those people that don't know, there are 3 phases: phase 1, phase 2, and then phase 3. And phase 3 is the final one before you get a registered product. So having a phase 2 approved clinical trial is exciting. And that one's focusing on, it's a full double-blind placebo trial focusing on palliative care, in particular oncology. That's the route that I firmly believe we have to go to be able to turn this from a medicine that is possible to use to one that people accept. And I suppose another way of saying it is, it's almost, I call it the little old lady syndrome. What we need to do is we need to get the little old lady comfortable that using cannabis medicine is something that is, that they can use safely and isn't a street drug. And that's what the industry is struggling with, is trying to move it from the historic vision of who smokes cannabis to something that is a genuine mainstream medicine.
That's so true. That's so true. I remember once there was a lady who came when Sanjay Gupta did his documentary series on cannabis and the medicinal use, and talking about how he had been taken in by the stigma. And the more that people that he spoke to and the more that he experienced with the stories, the more he understood that he needed to reassess his beliefs around that. And that documentary series was so impactful. I had an older woman. She was a senior. She was in her 80s, and she came in and she said, "I've never used it before, but if Dr. Gupta says it's okay, I'm coming in and trying it." And it was really wonderful to see how conversation does create normalization. And then the next step is creating that safe container for experimentation, because as we're learning with, cannabis science and the modes of use, everybody reacts differently. But that also echoes really how we should be looking at pharmacology, because it isn't a one size fits all thing. Like, I was just talking to my mother-in-law today because I'm here in sunny Arizona hanging out with family. She has neuropathy in her feet, and gabapentin has been wonderful for her for helping with that. And when I have residual peripheral neuropathy from my chemotherapy, and gabapentin makes me a very crabby person. But a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 ratio of CBD works really well for me to alleviate any symptoms of pain. And I just think it's an amazing thing to have this normalization, to give people options, and also really just to kind of see the surprise and delight that people get when they realize that they have other options that don't necessarily have to be pharmaceuticals, that could be impactful in other ways. And with that, I'm really curious to hear about some of the products that you're having, and perhaps some of the cannabinoids that you're working with, and how that's impacting others.
Well, so the set of products that we have in Avextra. So we have a cultivation facility in Portugal, and we have a manufacturing facility in Germany where we produce the various different oils that we sell. So the 1010, 25, 125. So really, we also produce a product called dronabinol, which is very it is coming into the UK increasingly, but it's very much in the German market, which is really super highly concentrated THC. So we in Avextra, we sell our oils, we sell dronabinol, we sell Bedrocan, just simply because that's something that is a portfolio product that you need to be in the market. And we are the flower that we grow in Portugal is being used both to secure our supply for our oils, but we're also going to start to sell that in the UK in the short term. Oh. So that, so we're kind of doing seed to sale. I think, we are doing seed to sale. And they are the products that we're currently focusing on today.
Now, for our listeners who may be not as familiar with the European market, why Portugal for doing your cultivation?
Because it's got a lot of sun. I mean, we've got a greenhouse, so it's not an indoor grow, it's a greenhouse grow. So the climate is particularly beneficial down there. And also, Portugal is a lower cost area of Europe in which to base a cultivation facility. And, at the end of the day, cultivating is what we've seen in the industry, it's a rush to the bottom. So it's all about producing the high quality product as cheap as you can. So we selected Portugal both for climatic reasons, but also for cost reasons. And also the Portuguese government are very supportive of it. It's something that it's an industry that they are trying to encourage to move into some of the areas in Portugal that really have got nothing in them. Mm-hmm. So we have a huge amount of land in Portugal, probably way more than we need. But the beauty of it is that we have something like 250 hectares of beautiful Portuguese countryside, but our facility is sited right in the middle of it. And the reason we did that is because we are producing in a medical GMP environment. It's really important that there's no pesticides, there's nothing at all that can impact the product. So for us, that was another advantage, was product security, if you like, because of how it's situated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, I was just agreeing. But I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, and it's what, so we have our license. It took a while to get our license. We have our license in Portugal now, and we have an R&D license. We have an exporting license. We've harvested our we've been doing test harvests, and what we are seeing is that it's working. We're getting really high quality product out of the facility, which is good to see.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, a lot of people don't realize how impactful it is to where you grow, because, when we're looking at cannabis, it's a bioaccumulator. So you have to have you have to have a clean soil. You have to have great air. I mean, because it leaches everything out of the air and the soil. It's very efficient. And also, looking at, for those of you who are purchasing CBD outside in a retail setting that's not a dispensary, they need to know that, there aren't the controls that there are when you're looking at a company like Avextra, or in the States, a company that's licensed to actually work in the cannabis, the THC rich market in many states, because otherwise you could be dealing with heavy metals, not knowing what it's grown with. There's a lot of things that come into play that are particularly impactful for people with compromised immune systems. And when we're looking at medical cannabis, we're often talking about that. But even generally for consumption, one should always be really careful about what they're putting in their bodies, because it can be extraordinarily impactful. And I love seeing what's going on in Portugal. It's so fascinating.
I think what is sometimes not fully understood is that medicinal cannabis, we are complying with, GMP, which is a set of rules in Europe, which is effectively pharmaceuticals. So because of that, because of the very high standards, it means that we have to prove exactly what is in our products. And so the users, therefore, to echo your point about, putting into your body, you need to know what you put into your body. When people see a product that is being produced at that level of pharmaceutical grade standard, then they know there is nothing at all in that product that they don't know about, because it tells you on the label. And so when you get into the discussion of, people can say, well, I can buy the product in the recreational market. Why would I buy it in the medicinal market? I would say two things to that. Firstly, I know specifically in the UK, the pricing is virtually the same. And secondly, for me, the real difference is you've no idea what you're getting in the recreational market, whereas in the medicinal market, you are. And whilst that comes with burdens and costs and all of the things that we like to complain about this industry, the reality is for the user, it's the perfect outcome, because they get a product that they know exactly what they're consuming.
Yeah. And with your oils, so that people can kind of see the different prices, because it's even in the States, like from state to state, depending on, the taxation and the regulation, the prices are very different. Per gram, how much are your oils at this moment in time?
So per gram, that isn't the way, we look at it in terms of, a bottle and different sizes of bottles.
Yeah. So
it would be for a 50 ml bottle, I think about roughly about 100 euros.
Okay.
So it's not cheap, but I know, for example, in the UK, we are going to sell our the cannabis the flower that we are growing, for example, that's going to be £8 per gram. So it's different in different markets, and one of the drivers for that is that in Germany it's a reimbursable market. So in Germany you can claim it back in your health insurance, which has some different impacts on the overall pricing. But the UK is the one I know the best, and that's where I know that the £8 per gram that we are able to sell the medical product for flour, not for oil, that's equivalent to the black market price, which is quite remarkable. I think we can get it through the medical route and at the same price.
That's amazing, because that's been one of the biggest things with us with the illicit or traditional market here in the States, has been that people don't want to spend the money that they have to in dispensaries. And it's surprising, because when I first started working in cannabis, it was a good cultivar, like a top shelf cultivar, went somewhere between $3,000 and $3,500 per pound. And now it's substantially low. It's in the hundreds. But we're still seeing where cannabis is more expensive in the dispensaries than it is in the traditional market. And a lot of that has to do with the excessive taxation that we have in certain states, and also a lot of the cost of doing business, which some of it is essential. I mean, we have to have testing. There are lots of things that come into play to keep people safe and to have quality product. But I think that, we do a disservice to the industry when we can't compete with the illicit market.
I would agree. And look, that's, if you go back to one of the questions you asked me about, why did we choose Portugal? I mean, that comes back to Portugal is a low cost environment in which we can grow the product. And, that, I think, so I don't know the American market at all, but in Europe, we've seen a constant drive to reduce prices, and I think that's what I've seen that in Canada. I've seen that in the US. I'm not sure. I know because I've listened to your program before.
Oh, thank you.
The burden of taxes in the US seems to be higher at the moment than it is for us in Europe. Maybe that'll change. I mean, I think that one of the fallacies that some governments have is that cannabis is a great way to generate taxation revenue, and because of that, they've over-levied the industry, I think. And in Europe, so far, we haven't seen that. So, that might change, but, at the moment, we are able to produce the product. It isn't a gold mine, but we're able to produce the product, and make enough profit to allow us to keep doing it.
It seems like you've taken a more common sense approach, and perhaps you've learned from some of the mistakes that we've made.
Well, I think that's true, and I think one of the it's definitely been an advantage to watch what's happened in Canada. America's less transparent to us over here, I think. The Canadian market is the one that we've been able to watch most closely, and definitely you can see many of the things that worked well over there, but you can also see some of the challenges that they ran into, and then try and anticipate that in our business and learn from the problems that they encountered and try and deal with them up front, as we try and operate in Europe.
What are some of the European markets that you're looking forward to opening up? Because I know, there's Germany, there's the UK, of course, I have colleagues that are, going to Spanibus and going to the private clubs. So there's definitely some movement in Spain, but what are you noticing, and what are you thinking is going to be happening in the coming years as far as growth for Avextra and other markets?
So what we have today is Germany is the most advanced market in Europe. So we have sales and distribution. We manufacture our product in Germany. We have sales and distribution in Germany. We have the clinic in the UK, so we're able to sell our products in the UK. We have a license, sales and distribution agreements in Italy now. We have and in Switzerland and in Austria. And they're in the early stages, but we have them in place, and we're currently, Italy looks an exciting market. It's developing very, very, very nicely for oil. And I think the big market in Europe that we hope comes online sometime in the near future is France. So, France has been, they're still in the pilot stage. They are still in discussions. There's still some questions to be answered, but that is a huge market that isn't open yet, but that we hope becomes open. Poland is another of the countries that we hope to expand into, but really, I think the big opportunity for the industry, if we can find a way of getting it legislated, is France.
That's exciting. That's so exciting. With the cannabinoids that you're working with right now for the company, is it primarily THC and CBD, or are you working with other emerging cannabinoids as well?
No, it's THC predominantly.
Okay. Yeah, see, I find that so fascinating. And it's in the States here when I first started, we weren't talking about CBD at all. There were some CBD products, nobody knew anything about them. They languished on the shelves. And then all of a sudden CBD became the huge word, and it created miracles, and everybody was all into it. But I think one of the things that we are having more conversations about is that THC is very medicinal, and it has a lot of value, and we have to have more conversations about that, especially from like an antispasmodic and analgesic approach. It's incredibly valuable. And I think because of the CBD market and the market, people looking at it as an opportunity for creating revenue without having to do a lot of going through the hoops of the regulated THC rich cannabis market, people are going into that and we're getting a lot of misinformation about what it can and can't do. And I think people are a little terrified of THC if they have never experienced it and they've heard the horror stories. We still have remnants of stigma around that.
I mean, I completely agree. So CBD, CBD is completely differently regulated than THC. Now, whilst that may be an advantage in that it makes it more widely available, from our perspective, we're focusing on the THC highly regulated market. And I suppose two things. One is, to your point about the horror stories of using THC, within Integral Medical Clinics, which is our clinic in the UK, we specifically hired initially one nurse, but we've now got more than one, whose job was to help patients who were using cannabis medicines for the first time, so that there was somebody on call that they could, if they were prescribed it and then they started to consume it and they didn't like the reaction or they didn't understand the reaction, there was somebody they could ring up and say, look, I'm trying this for the first time and I'm feeling a bit like this. Is this weird? And they had somebody that they could talk through the initial use of it. And we found in our clinic that was a real, it was one of the doctor's ideas. And I think it was a brilliant one because it helped people to get comfortable with a medicine that they had heard some bad stories about. So, that I think is useful. I mean, the other thing with THC, so one of the other, whilst we've got one phase 2 clinical trial, we also have a number of observational trials. And one of them is in particular is with the German Pain Association, or the German Pain Society, and that's focused on, and we're the only company they're working with. Obviously, it's focused on pain, and it's focusing on the pain that comes post chemotherapy. So post chemotherapy, people suffer from pain in their limbs, just general, because of the impact chemotherapy has on your body. And so what they want us to do work with them on is looking at how the benefits of cannabis medicines can be used to mitigate that pain. And I'm excited about that because we spent a long time talking to the German Pain Society, and to get their confidence that we could work together to operate and investigate this field, and they've now decided that they'll work with us on it, and that's I think a real opportunity. And for that, my experience is when you're dealing with severe pain, it's the THC piece of the product that you need to be able to deal with those high levels of pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm always, people come up to me and say that they're using CBD only for pain and really not getting the results that they need. And you have to dial it back and really break it down for them and say, that's wonderful for things like inflammation, anxiety, spasms, but you have to have the THC in there for the analgesic effect. That's what affects the pain. And I think that, the fact that you have such a great support structure with your clinic. And also when I was looking at your website, I noticed that, although I couldn't read it because it was in German, but that you have a lot of great materials for healthcare providers so that they can actually learn more. Is it more about the products, or is it breaking down what cannabis does? I'd be curious to know what those papers are.
So I think there's an English toggle on the website. So I'm now going to go and check it after this and find out what's that, so I think it's everything that it's a lot of information about the history of cannabis medicines. It's a lot of information about some papers that we have been able. I mean, there are papers that have been written. There's not been clinical trials done, but there are. In Germany, one of the conditions of being able to prescribe cannabis medicines is that so there's 3 tests. The first is that it's got to be considered serious. The second test is that you've got to have tried a number of other therapeutic options. But the third in Germany, not in the UK, but the third in Germany is there has to be some evidence to support the fact that cannabis medicines will create a benefit. And therefore there are papers out there. I mean, GW did a number of them.
Yes.
That do that do show the benefits of it. So there's a lot of information on the website, but it tries to just it's trying to help, it's trying to educate, it's trying to make people learn, or not make people, give people the opportunity to learn as much as they can from the information that we know.
Yeah. You do have a English toggle. It was just for the medical professionals, it was just in German. And I was like, I took Spanish in school, so that won't help me.
Well, my German is not, even though I've worked for a German bank for 22 years, my German has not advanced hugely from the days that when I was at school. The other thing, just sort of jumping a bit back to our because I think it just expands a little bit on one of the points you made. So in our phase 2 trial, we're looking at, as I said, oncology patients, palliative care oncology. And we're looking at pain, but we're not just looking at pain itself. We're looking at what we call the symptom burden. So we're looking at, the impact on sleep, the impact on anxiety, the impact on the reduction of opioids, and how all of that contributes to the discomfort and the pain that the patients are suffering in that part of their life. Because, so it's not, in that study, it's not just pain itself, it's other factors that can help to, we're looking at other factors that we think help to create that pain, and then how the cannabis medicine can help to alleviate subsymptoms, if you like, which in turn then reduces the overall pain burden.
That's amazing. One thing that I noticed with THC use as well is I had a resectioning of my colon before I went through my 12 rounds of chemo, and I had to use opiates when I was out of the hospital. And I'm a person who does not use a lot of pharmaceuticals, and I am very lucky that I don't have bad relationships with substances. Like, I smoked as a young woman and they said, you have to stop. And I just stopped. And my friends were like, you just stopped. I was like, yes, I did. But with opiates, I found I was really impacted by the fact that after 2 weeks of using it and taking myself off, that I was having withdrawal symptoms with things like restless legs, having a hard time sleeping. But I was actually able to use THC to alleviate some of those symptoms from taking myself off of the pharmaceuticals. And I'd really be interested to see some research on that in regards to cancer patients in particular, and because when you go through cancer, it's amazing all the things you get. You have a drawer full of all of these drugs that, you wouldn't normally be working with, nor would they be given so easily. It's mind blowing.
Opioids, we all now know that the problems with opioids, it's widely discussed. And for me, that's one of the real opportunities with cannabis medicines. And I see that when I look at the patients that come through our clinic. So they're coming through our clinic for multiple different things, but one of the common threads is people getting off opioids, and they're using cannabis medicines to do it. And, that is, if you're looking at for the greater good of the planet, to me, that's one of the real opportunities that we have if we can get cannabis medicine accepted as a mainstream medicine. There's lots of benefits in many areas, but really, one of the key ones from my perspective is to get people off opioids, which we know, and using a medicine that's less damaging to their bodies.
Absolutely. And the other side effects of them, depending on what you're going through, can be pretty awful too. And also, even just the side effects of anti-nausea drugs can be very impactful, though they can be very helpful to help with nausea. They do have their side effects. I know for me, going through colon cancer, it was, constipation for both of them, which could be deadly when you're dealing with, the intestines. And it's just nice to have something different. And it's amazing that you're doing the work that you're doing to not only inform professionals, create the conversations, take down the stigma, but hopefully this will also influence better policy. Because I know the UK has had some issues with, even though they have a medical program, patients can often still, they aren't necessarily protected by the law.
So I think, there's 2 points I would say in the UK, which are interesting. So we held a conference. We organized a conference under the banner of Integro, and we invited doctors and other interested professionals to come to the conference to discuss cannabis medicines. And one of the people that we invited to the conference was the person that was responsible within NICE, which is the body that decides which medicines can or can't be bought by the National Health Service. And we invited him to come and join a panel, and he did. And what he said clearly and somebody asked him the question, why is it that we're not making cannabis medicines available in the National Health Service? And he said, I keep telling you guys, you guys meaning the industry, that you have to provide the data that will allow us to prescribe the medicine. You can't just expect us to prescribe it. And for me, that was a really telling response, which is what has driven partly our strategy, in that it was clear from that, just looking at the UK, but it's the same everywhere, is that, the medicines go through testing for a reason. It's because doctors are trained to prescribe medicine that's been tested. So when you're going outside of that regime, you're always battling against the traditional wisdom, which is why, for us, the Pillar 2 strategy is so important. Not just for us, but for the industry. I mean, if we can get more registered medicines, the whole cannabis industry is going to be in a very different place than it was before.
Yeah, for sure. So we talked a little bit about, growth in Europe and some of the areas that you're excited to do work in. But when you're looking at the future, what are you excited about? What are you hoping that you start working on in research?
Well, I mean, those clinical trials and the observational studies, they're just starting now. So really the phase 2 one starts beginning of December. So whilst I can talk a lot about what we're hoping to come from it, nothing's happened yet. So really, for me, the future is watching those studies develop and getting the data, and then hopefully the data, moves us forward in the right direction. But it's really all about the research. If I look at Avextra, 5 years from now, I want us to be the leading clinical trial and have 1 or 2 registered medicines in our portfolio. That's where I think the from my perspective, the really exciting opportunity comes, because is when we will then be in a position to benefit the broader society. We want this to be, I come back to the little old lady syndrome. It's getting people who are today, they're a bit scared of using the medicine, which could give them the benefit, getting them to actually then, or giving them the opportunity to use it, because we've gone through the proper process and trials that then give them the confidence, both the doctors and the patients, to prescribe and to use the medicine.
Yeah, that's just so exciting. I can't wait to see what happens with your clinical trials. When we were first having the conversation about having you on the show, I was just so excited to sit down with you and learn more about this. And it's been a pleasure, Neil, sitting with you today. For people who want to learn more about Avextra or follow you on social media, how would they go about doing that?
Well, we have our website, which is I'm not sure of the exact website address, but Avextra.com. I think you'll find us that way. We're on LinkedIn. We post there, but really, I suppose our website is the primary source where you can see what's happening. You can see. We try and put we've got videos of our facilities on there. So if you're interested in the Portuguese facility, you can we have a video where we walk the video camera around the facility, so you can see how it actually works, and you can see our plant material that's there. And we'll continue to use that as our primary interface so that people can keep updated as to what we're actually doing.
I love that. I'm just so incredibly, it's just been a pleasure talking with you today, and it's just really been exciting to see and hear more about what you're doing. The website has a lot of great information, so for those of you who are curious about what is going on in the European market in Avextra, please check it out.
Yeah, I mean, you can also follow myself, so Neil Smith and Bernard Babel, who's the other co-founder. You can follow us on LinkedIn. and we post on LinkedIn, and there's an Avextra LinkedIn page, so you can, that's another route that we use. But it's primarily those two sources.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. As this continues, I would love to have you and Bernard on the show again so we can hear more about what's going on with the clinical trials as they progress, because I know the listeners are very curious about the different markets. And I talk a lot about the United States, but we really, as this starts to grow, this is a very global thing. And it's good to hear about everything that's going on, and also so that we can learn from one another. Having a good, strong, safe market that is able to serve people in a very constructive way is amazing.
No, I'd love to. I mean, sadly, the clinical trials, they take a bit of time. So, but I'd love to come back, and it would be great to come on to come back and say, look, this is where we've got to, and here's what we've learned, and because by definition, it's going to be more than we know today, and that'll be great to be able to share it. So, thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today.
Oh, thank you. And I know we're going to have a lot to talk about next time because it will take some time, but I thank you for your work, and thank you for making the brave jump into the work.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
And everyone remember, Planted is twice a month. And if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Pion on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher. Tune in. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.